Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Hello, there's James and Dennis. Hello.
Hello.
Nice to see you both. Thank you for your patience. I'm sorry we're running a little bit late.
Nope.
It was almost like a domino effect of technical issues. But here we are together. And there's Elizabeth. Hello.
Hi, how are you? Fine, thank you.
Good, good. Very nice to have you. And we're still waiting for Willem and Emmanuel.
Shut the sound.
He will be coming in. There's Willem. Hello, Willem.
Hello, Kisa. How are you?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks.
Excellent. Good to see you there. And while we wait for Emmanuel to join us, he's online, so he's going to come into the room as soon, Emmanuel, as you press the blue button on the top right of your screen. There we are.
Hello.
Excellent. Hello. Nice to have you all here. Very much looking forward to this panel discussion, which follows, of course, Dennis's keynote address that he delivered this morning. And IFC Edge has been sponsoring this day. They're our green building sponsor, and very keen to hear about what many people often posit as a dichotomy. It's either affordable or it's green. And I'd like you to challenge that. I hope you will, so that we can really get a sense of how do we do both at the same time. This is your panel, Dennis. You're moderating, so I'm going to hand over to you and let you lead the discussion. If I can just say one thing, everybody who's participating in the audience, please introduce yourselves in the chat. Put your comments and questions in the chat, so that the participants might be able to respond to those as they're carrying on with the discussion as well. Thanks so much. Over to you, Dennis.
Okay. Thank you, Kesia. So good afternoon. Yes, actually it's afternoon. It may be morning, depending on where you are joining us from. Emmanuel, I know it's very, very early on your side.
It's a normal early rise for me. Thank you.
So before we start, I would allow everyone to introduce themselves. I don't think I would do a good work if I should introduce you myself. So I would ask James if you can start with introductions, and then tell us a little bit about yourself and then your company and the kind of projects that you do, just within about 2 minutes max.
Thanks, Dennis. My name is James Mitchell. I'm co-founder and CEO at BuildX Studio based in Nairobi. I'm an architect myself, originally from Scotland, and I've lived in Kenya for many years now. Our work is really focused on disrupting the way in which we build, particularly around climate change, social equity, and health and well-being. And we design, build, and develop our own buildings, mostly in education, affordable housing, and other public and private sector buildings.
Thank you so much, James. Can we go on to William?
I'm Willem Wittenal. I'm the technical specialist of International Housing Solutions. We are an equity investor in affordable housing in South Africa, Namibia, as well as Botswana, and we are planning to extend our operations to Kenya next year. We are one of the first companies in South Africa that actually use the Edge tool to green units.
Okay, can we go on to Emmanuel?
Yes, hello everyone. I am a co-founder of EcoStone Housing Systems. We have introduced technology, systems, and financial tools in order to promote the development of affordable housing. We're active in Panama and Nigeria up till now, with rapid expansion into a number of other African and Latin American countries in particular. And my title is the Chief Sustainability and Development Officer. I have a background in planning, design, engineering, and finance. Thank you.
Okay, great. And then we have Elizabeth. Elizabeth, can you go?
Yeah. Thank you. Save the best for last. So, Elizabeth Ngetu Shege. I'm the chairperson of the Kenya Green Building Society. I'm also the Vice Chairperson of the Africa Regional Network of the World Green Building Council. My core background is sustainable engineering, and I've been advocating for green buildings in Kenya since 2010. After practicing in the rest of the world, I saw a great opportunity for Kenya to actually meet that core. Thank you.
Okay, great. So with the introductions out of the way, we can go ahead and start our discussion. As Kesia introduced, this panel is supposed to look at green and affordable housing. Is it possible for both to coexist at the same time? And all of you have vast experience in this area, and we would want to share that with those that are listening to us. Now, if I may come to James, you are a co-founder for Builders Studio in Kenya, right? Can you just take us through your development model? How are you able to keep your projects to meet the green and sustainability standards? And then secondly, which measures do you usually focus on?
So yeah, our work, we do focus and use the EDGE tool a fair amount on our buildings, and we're currently developing a new affordable housing concept for urban Nairobi, which is EDGE certified. However, a big part of our work is really on trying to fundamentally shift how we build and really focusing on the level of urgency and the targets that we need to hit and are currently not on track for in terms of climate change mitigation. We all know that buildings and construction contributes almost 40% of our global carbon emissions, have a profound impact on our human health, and we're also experiencing rapid growth in the sector of new buildings constantly coming up, and yet continuously using relatively high carbon techniques to build most of them. And so one of the things that we're really looking at is how do we change that? The topic of this conversation is affordable and green, and I think a lot of people do see that as affordable or green. I don't think that's always the case, but I do think it can be challenging. And I think largely it's not so much due to the technical solutions as it is to the social and cultural and economic barriers to building green at times. A lot of alternative materials that we might want to look at, things like mass timber or other natural bio-based materials, carry certain biases or prejudices with them, and we have certain misconceptions or certain attitudes as a population to a lot of those materials that can help us change the narrative. So BuildX it does deliver projects within the existing market conditions, and we use tools, as I mentioned, like EDGE to do that and certify that. But we're also trying to look at how can we develop buildings of 30 years' time today, and how can we use that to accelerate the growth and the changes in the sector more rapidly and more quickly. So we're doing things like setting up the first mass timber buildings to be developed in Kenya, and looking at how we can accelerate the volumes of scale to bring those cost points in line with concrete and steel, and to challenge the social perceptions around those materials. So we really believe we need to take bolder action, particularly if we're going to reach the targets that we know we need to reach by 2030 and 2050.
Great. So I'll come back to you on alternative materials, but then let me just ask William. You know, IHS is one of the very first organizations that started operating the green and affordable housing sector in Africa. You mentioned that in your introduction. Now, what exactly has been your experience so far after all these years? And do you have plans of using the same model in other countries? I know you are focused mainly in South Africa and you are going to Kenya, but what has the experience been in South Africa, first of all, and what are you changing if you are going to other countries?
Basically, we start with this green initiative because one of our investors is IFC, and one of the requirements of the investment was that we must green 5,600 units. Green basically is as built certification. 2018, we achieved our first project with Edge Asphalt certification. That's Ravenswood, and up to now we have 6 projects, 1,500 units, Edge Asphalt certified, and about 23 projects with design certification currently under construction. And we have extended, although it was not an investor requirement, we extended our operations to Namibia. We have 2 design certified projects there. That's formally certified by the Green Building, International Green Building Council. And we have a further 4 projects in Botswana and 2 in Namibia that we actually meet the Edge design certification. Now, when we start with the program, it's the issue of affordability, and we calculate the additional cost at about 17,000 rand, to about $1,000 additional cost per unit. And through experience, we have dropped that cost now to about $250 per unit. Now, a unit in our terms is basically a high-density unit of about 50 square meter footprint, and affordability levels below 840,000 rand. What we have learned and what is our experience is basically your Edge tool has 38 interventions. So you can actually select any of those 38 interventions to meet your 20% energy, 20% water, and 20% embodied energy savings. And through our experience, we have determined which are the low cost interventions. For instance, to change your window to wall ratio, it doesn't cost you any money. It's just your spec must be such, and your design must be such to actually meet that requirement. So there's a substantial. Well, the additional cost is minimal, but then we also monitor the performance of the units. So on a monthly basis, through our prepaid meter system, we track the water consumption as well as the electricity consumption per unit, and compare it with what we call the base case, the Edge base case. And we outperform the 20% savings through our monitoring system. We have 2 projects, exactly the same design, same contractor, within 1 kilometer for each other, what we call Jackleberry, that's non-Edge certified, and Ravenswood Edge certified. And that enables us to actually compare the performance of the two projects. And the green project or the Edge certified project perform at least 12% better. So what are the advantages? Is basically it's the saving that we generate for our tenants. I don't know whether I must proceed to actually explain the savings, or we'll get to that point later.
Okay, that's very interesting insights over there, and I'm sure we would have a lot more questions on that side. But before that, Emmanuel, you also working with EcoStone are doing something very interesting. Mm-hmm. I've seen some of your projects. Actually, I was at the site when you commissioned that building that you did in 14 days, right? Can you tell us more about your project and what measures you at, and how are you able to select between the very expensive ones and the very cost-effective measures? What's the effect on your project?
Right. Well, we found that building green is certainly not a barrier to entering the affordable housing market, but actually an advantage. And EcoStone was amongst the first Edge champions in the world. We have built the first Edge Advanced project in Nigeria, and as I understand it, it was only the third Edge Advanced project in all of Africa. So we're very proud of that record. We found that we can build green just by applying our proprietary technology, which is a cellular lightweight concrete. It's concrete that's manufactured on site using certain kind of materials that were invented about 100 years ago, but we've applied them in a unique way. And just the application of this special concrete reduces our carbon footprint by about 35 to 50%, depending on local conditions. We also apply, as Willem has said, just an analysis of looking at the cost benefit of certain measures like low flow faucets and colors of roof. Simple things which don't necessarily cost money. We found that getting our Edge Advanced certification costs us far less than 1% of traditional construction costs. We've also found that our system of building with our technology increases the rate at which we can build. We are currently in the planning stages of a project where we can reduce the traditional construction time by half, which not only reduces the carbon footprint, but also increases the financial viability of the project. And at the same time, doubling the profit of the developer. So what we do is apply our technology in a partnership with local developers and contractors to help increase their performance. We do this not just on the building, but in the context of the building, which LEED, for example, acknowledges. Edge, I think, is moving in that direction. The site, the context of the community, using green infrastructure, and designing with using nature and natural systems to benefit both the human as well as the natural ecosystems. So I'm happy to go into more detail, but I'll try to keep it brief unless you have a specific question.
All right. I'm sure we'll come back to that later on. Now, Elizabeth, you are the chairperson of the KGBS. You guys are doing marvelous things. In Kenya, you're doing so well in pushing the green building market. Now, when it comes to the affordability question, I'm sure a lot of your clients and the stakeholders that you interact with have been asking, how have you been able to address this? And what has been the feedback?
Well, it's great to be on a panel with like-minded people, but the bigger percentage is out there, and I hope that they're joining the session. So as Kenya Green Building Society, we started back in 2012. And the initial discussion around the model of green buildings is advocacy, education, and certification. So first of all, we had to look at the certification systems available that could be adapted to Kenya. We used LEED as well as Green Star. And eventually, we signed an MOU with IFC back in 2017 at the Africa Green Building Summit held in Nairobi. But the conversation was very much about saving the planet, because that was the common discussion around the world about green buildings. That didn't go far. Went nowhere at all, actually. There were very few developers or investors who were interested in talking about saving the planet. At the back of SDGs actually being ratified in 2016, we realized there's the common language. We needed to link the SDGs to the benefits of green buildings. Beyond that, there was the education that we had to share with the public as well as government, that we are on the equator. And I actually invite you, when you say you're coming to Kenya, we're on the equator, so our climate is fantastic. So the discussion around window to wall ratio is a no-brainer. We even had to take it back to indigenous ways of building, indigenous to beyond colonization, because it's after colonization that we adopted concrete, machine cut stone, etc. But before that, we were actually designing and building to climate and really considering our local materials as well. Something else we had to do to talk about affordability beyond the climatic design was to look at what the electric company strategy was. So we looked at the increment cost of the tariffs for the last 10 years and the future 10 years. So it really helped to show that the return on investment on building green and using passive design was actually going to work for the developer as well as the users of the space. Another aspect that we realized people were forgetting is water. Kenya is actually a water-stressed country now, and a quarter of the cities are actually in water-stressed areas. So in the discussion about water was availability, not even affordability, availability of affordable water. So rainwater harvesting and the measures that are actually articulated in EDGE with the low-flow fixtures came to front. Beyond that, we did some work on the cost of materials locally. Initially, materials like low-flow fixtures, when they came into Kenya, they were actually charged slightly at a premium. But now, and in the last 2 years, the cost is the same or even lower because the demand has grown. When you want to save your water, when you want your 1 liter of water to go further, you'll buy the low-flow fixtures, and that's actually common in the market as well. So as a green building council, we had to do the background work and work with like-minded developers to actually be able to showcase and give the documentation from the market to show affordability is not separate from green. If it's not affordable, we normally say then it's not green.
Great. So if it's not affordable, it's not green.
Yeah.
Right. So I would go back to Emmanuel. Emmanuel, when you did the EcoStone project, how were you able to showcase the green measures in the project? How were you able to get your end users to understand that these are the measures that you have in the project? And did that affect your marketing? Did it bring some advantage to you compared to your competitors?
Yeah, we definitely use the EDGE certification as a competitive advantage. We demonstrate to the potential buyers that the EDGE certification will result in about 1/3 of savings in their utility bills. At the same time, providing a healthier environment with proper ventilation, proper lighting, and especially now in the days of COVID, where ventilation is even more critical, we emphasize those aspects in the promotion of our projects. We also, as I mentioned earlier, try to incorporate green elements into the site. So there's more green space available, open space for the owners, for gardening, for playing, for the children to play with, but also to manage stormwater, for example, and recharge groundwater with rainwater. Those are among the things that we emphasize, the financial advantages as well as the quality of life.
Okay, great. William, you earlier mentioned that the incremental cost for going green initially was about $1,000 per unit, but you've been able to get it down to as low as $250 per unit. Now, how are you able to keep these costs down? What have you done differently so that other developers or investors that are listening to us can take a cue? And I would also want you to let us know some of the major challenges that you've had in attempt to green your projects.
Now, I think I will start with the challenges. The one challenge was actually to convince our professionals and contractors that actually to green a project is not difficult and it's not expensive. And one of our investors, KfW, provided funding that we can train our professionals, contractors, as well as property managers related to the advantages of green. So with that as a basis, our professionals then, with the 38 interventions of the EDGE tool, we have applied certain interventions and then we find they are more expensive and we can use other interventions that is actually cheaper. And currently we are achieving the required savings with only 14 interventions. Some of the interventions is basically so your window to wall ratio, it's costing you nothing. And we also, for instance, used prepaid meter systems. that allow us to be used as a smart meter to provide information to the end user, because the end user must still manage that unit. We are saying if you cannot measure it, then you cannot manage it, according to Stephen Covey, and that is exactly what's happening. If the guy, we have the target or final case consumption of water and electricity, it's known to him, and he can monitor his consumption by comparing that. Then the other challenge that we find is the sustainability of the project. I think it's not so much to get a green certificate from the Green Building Council of Kenya or the Green Building Council of South Africa, but to ensure that those interventions are maintained. For instance, your LED light is not replaced by other lights. Your low flow shower heads is not replaced, and that is that your tenant must be informed about the benefits of staying in a green unit, and he must maintain that. We have a large number of rental units, and our property managers must actually inform the tenants of the benefit of staying in a green unit. The benefit to the tenant, as I explained, we have monitoring on a monthly basis consumption, and we give the tenants feedback. And it's at least on a year basis 4,000 rand, so a substantial saving for the tenant and in utility cost. And then the spin-offs is basically you reduce your carbon emissions, but the emphasis is not there. The emphasis is basically the tenant must save and the tenant must get the benefit.
Great. I like that. I mean, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. That's very true. And I mean, as you rightly mentioned, education is very important, because if you are not careful, you may hand over a green building with lots of green measures. The tenant that moves in thinks that he wants something else, and he changes the light bulb. And it just makes useless all the work that has been done. That's very. Let me, James. You also operate in Kenya, right? And there's something very interesting happening in Kenya. The government of Kenya a few months ago issued a decree for all affordable housing to meet the EDGE standard. That's supposed to be the basic minimum. Now, these projects are going to get free land for construction. Now, you are a developer. What do you think would be the effect of this on the green and affordable housing market? Do you think the government would like to initiate these incentives, or there are better incentives that as a developer you would expect from the government to catalyze the green building market?
I think it's a really great start. I think it begins to show buy-in and direction, and give a set of mandates for developers, many of whom are already interested in EDGE and using EDGE, but many of whom are not. And so I think putting in place incentives that can shift the market in that direction. Of course, things like free land begin to make the overall financials for the project look fairly good, and if that gives space to push forward some green innovation in the short term, I think there need to be more sustainable solutions. We can't give free land forever, I would imagine, and I think in that sense the government needs to look at really how does that as an initial incentive that I think begins to raise the profile of this issue, begins to encourage and ultimately get more built examples, because we don't actually have that many built examples of buildings that are EDGE certified or green as yet. And I also think that, but I do think in time more needs to be done. I think both through other incentives, but I think ultimately the world will need to get to a point where there's also potentially penalties for buildings that are doing the opposite of this, buildings that are actually causing damage to the environment, which are heavily perpetuating the use of either high carbon or fossil fuel or petrochemical materials. These things that we are so reliant upon. The industry needs time to change. I don't think you can introduce penalties immediately for that sort of thing, but we do need to foster and find a new culture of building. I think it's more than just building increased efficiencies into our current buildings and way of building. I think fundamentally we do need bigger shifts, but I definitely think this recent decree is a really great starting point.
Okay, great. Elizabeth, we're very instrumental in getting this incentive implemented, right? How important do you think it is to your work? And how are the developers that you're working with taking advantage of this?
Well, as I mentioned, our strategic work is advocacy. And when we realized we're talking to more or less ourselves in the construction industry, we realized definitely the education and training element had to come into play. And it wasn't just for the private sector, it was also for government and policymakers. So with that, we did work with IFC, and prior to that, we have always worked with UN Habitat to provide training, and arguably at a cheaper rate or as cheap as possible, free issue books and information, so people understand what green building is all about and how the tools can be used. So I would like to say IFC Edge is actually disruptive in the market because it's free, it's online, and you can do your own self-assessment. That was a starting point. And these discussions were pre-COVID. So even with COVID coming into play, we said there's no reason to slow down. And the fantastic thing about the State Department of Housing, PS Charles Hinga, is that he gets it. And with the deficit of millions of affordable housing that we have in Kenya, we saw there's a great opportunity to have a large-scale saving in embodied carbon, in energy and water as well. Beyond that, the people who are living in these houses need to be able to save. And the savings we're talking about in this panel, the money goes back to the people and keeps their head above the water with the costs of utilities going out now and then. So after the decree, the question was, what's next? And it's quite right what James has mentioned. We had the decree. We realized we really need to have intensified training for the developers, especially those who are going to build on the free land with affordable housing. Training for the entire State Department of Housing and the teams around construction and climatic development in all the ministries. Third to that, I'm not sure if you're aware, Kenya has been reviewing the building code, which is outdated. I won't test the date on it. But beyond the decree, we said we have to do more. As Emmanuel mentioned, there's other elements that we need to consider around sustainability. So we've requested that 2 units be added to the draft building code, which is a unit on sustainability in new buildings and another unit in sustainability in existing buildings, because we can't ignore those as well. And thankfully, Edge can also benchmark existing as well as new buildings. But for private sector, the uptake is that one of the banks, Absa Bank Kenya, which is our premium member, used IFC Edge to benchmark all their branches. And they spent $340,000 to bring them up to par, and they'll save $200,000 a year going forward, just by retrofitting. Those numbers are amazing. And when we share this data, I think the discussion around affordable and green is evolving more to how can we do it? And there's an urgency to be able to do it faster.
Great insight. Now, Emmanuel, EcoStone also has some sort of partnership with the Lagos State government, right? Are you able to tell us a bit more about this partnership and how it has contributed to your project being affordable?
Well, as we entered the market a few years ago, we needed to establish our technology and prove it into the marketplace. And the most efficient way was to create a public-private partnership with the state of Lagos. Their contribution was the land, and that was pre-permitted. And we provided the technology and the systems to build rapidly for the civil servants, employees primarily of the state of Lagos. We now that we've proven that we can build rapidly. That was 252 units in Badagry, outside of the city of Lagos. We now are offering the same technology and systems and financial learning that we've done with partnerships with developers and builders. And what we're trying to do is get that technology out there to have a larger impact on the affordable housing market. We feel like we can. It's very cumbersome, as you know, to create public-private partnerships, and if we can create partnerships with developers and contractors on the ground, we can have an exponentially larger impact on the velocity of offering affordable housing in the marketplace.
Yeah, I mean, in our work at IFC, what we've seen is that partnership with governments, having these incentives really does go a long way in making the dispatching easy. So we are happy that a lot of our clients are doing that route, and we are getting some governments very interested in this. Hopefully, we'll get other governments also following from the Kenyan example. We may get Nigeria government, and then Ghana and South African government also provided some other incentives, for development. Now, William, on the back of this, what do you think would need to change for Africa to have successful case studies like that of IHS when it comes to affordable housing?
I think they must change the building regulations. There are very minor changes. For instance, installing LED lights, low-flow shower heads, dual flush toilets. We find that in South Africa we are quite advanced with our building regulations. For instance, 50% of water heating must come from an alternative source. But when you get to Botswana and Namibia, they are using our building regulations of about 40 years ago. And it's very simple intervention. Change your building regulations, bring it to the latest technology to actually save water and save electricity. I think that's the major intervention that must be done. For instance, we are greening our units in Botswana and Namibia, but using South African building standards. So we are not using that because it's very easy to get the EDGE certification on Namibia's building regulations or base case, but we're using the South African base case to actually ensure that we get that more savings.
Great. Okay. So Emmanuel, yourself, I mean, what do you think will be the future for this space in the next 5 years? Do you see us getting more green and affordable housing projects? Is that going to be the norm, or you think it's going to be very difficult for us to?
Right. We try to convince people to implement green technologies to build green, right? But I think the future is that we can't afford to not be green. As the water resources become scarcer, as Elizabeth referred to, as energy becomes more expensive, as we try to reduce the carbon footprint of our cities and developments. I built the first LEED Platinum homes in Massachusetts, where I'm based, 13 years ago, and it cost me about 20% above market. I just wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. Today, if I was going to build the same development, it would cost me the same as traditional construction. It's just the thought processes that you put into the design and planning, and in particular the supply chain. The supply chain has become much more sophisticated than it was 13 years ago. It's easier and more affordable to find low-flow faucets, dual flush toilets, LED light bulbs. And so I think that as we educate the public, and as the public becomes more sophisticated, there will be no alternative but to build green.
Okay. So, and you touched on education. Elizabeth, would you want to tell us a bit more on, on education? How does extensive education and awareness creation amongst the end users affect this discussion? And what exactly has your team done in this area? But I think William also mentioned some bits about education. If a tenant does not know or they understand why you have some of these technology in the building, it may become useless, right? So what is your team doing in this area to help promote this?
Thanks for that, and it's quite true. One of the things we normally refer to is, the first time anyone had a smartphone, I hope we had to read some manuals. Same way with, a new car, you want to see how it's performing. So if you don't actually show people how to use it, they're going to break it and it'll stop being green. I like that the monitoring discussion has actually come in with performance. That was very, very important, especially, I don't want to attribute it to the African culture, but seeing is believing and touching and knowing that it exists was a huge element, so that it's not a matter of theoretical discussions and borrowing from other countries. It was very much a core discussion locally. The training was fundamental. We've even gone as far as having regular training every month beyond all the categories of education for sustainability. We've got agreements with IFC Edge as well for training online, and with the certifiers. We had to bring ThinkStep SGS and as well as GBCI in Kenya to say, we have both of them, we need this training, we need it to be online. So the element of COVID doesn't mean we stop learning and stop moving forward. We have technology to actually advance that, and it's a great opportunity. So beyond the professionals, we went to the universities, and I know we've been knocking the door at IFC Edge to say we need training for universities. We really need to have IFC Edge for universities in all our major universities. And the other aspect as well is training for the financiers. If they don't understand what it is, they'll carry on investing in green buildings the same way they do with brown buildings. So we found that to be a bit of a stickler, and that's the actual training we need to do with our financial markets. And also on the basis of the underwriters. Because once you get to understand where the money comes from, then there's the de-risking discussion that we need to have on the basis of how green buildings perform, and they need to be de-risked differently from brown buildings. So for the next few years, we've seen that our strategies will be very much around, yes, climate action. We have the tools that we need and education around it. And one of the outcomes of being told to stay home to stay safe is that people are respecting buildings a little bit more, and they can see the difference in their expenditure as well. So yes, we must take advantage of the crisis and come out of it better.
Great, thanks. Now, we are about rounding up. We have about 15 minutes. Now, let me come to you, James. So what's your advice for other developers that are doing affordable housing? And how can they also ensure that their housing is going to be built green?
So I would say first.
I think
So is that for me or for Willem?
Okay.
Sorry, so this was for James.
Sorry.
I'll come to you.
Okay, sorry.
I think I would say a big part of it is about being open to learning. Elizabeth has touched on it there. You know, many people, many developers still maybe need a handbook for some of these systems and methods that we can employ. A lot of these innovations are new. They haven't been tested. They haven't been trialed. So I think learning, being curious, discovering, I think backing innovations is critical. There's a lot of really promising, amazing products and solutions that are coming onto the market that need developers to back them to get there. And whilst risk needs to be taken into account, I think developers trying their best to find a home for a lot of these solutions that can grow can really go a long way in changing the environment that we're in terms of green products. I think factoring in longer term benefits into the thinking and project planning stages is critical, and how that gets communicated to the consumer or to the market. There's a lot of research out there that shows the benefits of green building that are not just for a couple. We've already touched on this conversation around the fact that climate change mitigation is a pretty tough sell. It's big data, it's science, it's hard to grab with your hands and really understand on a personal day-to-day level. But there's a lot of other things that green buildings can do. They can lower your monthly costs, that's already been mentioned. They can improve your health and well-being on a day-to-day basis. If we can make these part of a developer's thinking as standard, I think that really begins to shift the needle on how we build. And I think lastly, and this hasn't come up a lot, but one of the things that's really important at BuildX is engage women and engage all stakeholders. A greener future really involves everyone, and developers have such a profound level of power and influence on the world that we inhabit. More people need to be a part of that conversation, and we need to grow a greener future together.
Okay, great stuff. So William, what other lessons can other developers take from the example of IHS?
I think one must study the Edge tool and the user guide forms. You must understand the Edge tool, and I think what new developers can do is they must appoint a trained Edge expert to guide them, because otherwise they're going to waste money. The other issue is basically, as a developer, you sell or you rent your units, and you must explain those benefits to the tenants, because you can use that as a marketing tool, because there's definitely a financial saving that the people can achieve. And then in South Africa, there's already green bonds available, where banks are actually providing mortgage bonds at lower interest rates if the building is actually green. But it's basically a process. You must not waste time by thinking about green. The information is there, just appoint the right people, and you will get the benefit on the affordable side. Your tenants will get the benefit, and you as if you sell your units, there are certain benefits that you can achieve through your marketing of a green unit.
Okay, great. So this will bring us to the end of our session today. And it's been interesting. I mean, I have a few takeaways that I would want to just mention. So James indicated that the alternative material usage is important, but people have their own misconception, which is very true. I mean, we are used to building with brick and mortar, and once a new developer comes up with something else, we are like, okay, we are a bit hesitant. We would want to wait and then try and see. Yeah, so it's something that we really need to look at. Government incentive is also very great. We need to have a lot of partnerships, not just with government, with developers, with financial institutions, so that they can provide some sort of incentive for projects. And the example from IHS is also very, very encouraging. Being able to reduce your incremental cost from $1,000 per unit all the way to $250 by, ensuring that you have cost-effective measures in there. It's really good. And Elizabeth also touched on the work that they are doing, and then how training and education is very, very key and important in there. I think we have some questions on the chat from people that we can address. There is a question to William. The person is asking, Philip Addo is asking about which parts of the building regulation in Africa, particularly South Africa, should be changed to adequately promote green. William, would you want to take up that?
In South Africa, we are not yet there, but for instance, on the water heating, currently the water heating must be 50% from an alternative source. So you can go solar, you can use heat pumps, but we are using PV panels and to actually provide electricity to the unit, and up to 85 to 100% of water heating in certain cases is actually coming from PV, not from electricity. So there are various options, but government must actually start and say you must show a saving on your electricity used to heat water. Simple stuff is, for instance, low flow shower heads, dual flush toilets, LED lights. That doesn't cost a lot of money, but when they provide your occupation certificate, they must check whether you have installed those requirements.
Yeah, and Elizabeth, I think in Kenya, solar hot water collection, it's compulsory for housing. Is that right?
Yes, it was actually passed, but then it's gone back to court. But in the time that it was passed and used, a lot of the commercial buildings realized the savings. So the private sector has continued to actually input heat pumps and solar hot water solutions, while the requirement and regulation is still in court.
Okay. Is it because of the cost of the solar hot water collectors?
I do believe it's because the whole value chain hadn't been considered. So we did a bit of market disruption, and also the source of the solar hot water heaters, where they were coming from, who's maintaining them. And there was a lot of negative cases where the system would work for 6 months. It doesn't mean the strategy is wrong. It just means we had to consider the whole value chain. And I do believe that's what is being upgraded, and inclusion of elements like heat pumps, because it was very direct on solar hot water panels without thinking of all the other technologies that would use that strategy of renewable energy for hot water.
Okay, great. There is one last question from Peter. He's asking if we have data on savings achieved by retrofitting non-green buildings to green. Elizabeth, do you have any data, from your end? From our side, what we can say is the Edge software is available for you to do your own analysis. So you are able to take a non-green building through the Edge software and then see what sort of measures you can use to retrofit that building to make it green, and how it's going to impact on your savings, what the cost would be. So, Peter, I would advise if you can go onto the Edge website, www.edgebuildings.com. You can have access to the software and then do this analysis directly. But I don't know if any of the panel members have any other data that they want to share. I think William also talked about his project, where they compared the green certified project to the brown project, and they realized that the savings from the green project was as much as 12% better in terms of performance.
Yes, I wanted to add that at Kenya Green Building Society, we have data on a hotel that went through the same experience and is saving, and we have that data available. Great Western. Also, we have some residential buildings, so we're more than happy to share the information, and we can also extend the link to the edgebuildings.com website.
Okay, great. Okay, so it's been a very interesting panel, and I'm very sure everybody learned a lot. Everyone listening learned so much. Thank you, and let's continue to keep the discussion going.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, so over to you, Kesia.
Thank you, Dennis, and thank you, James and Elizabeth, Emmanuel and Willem. That was a fabulous panel and so efficiently managed, on time, and wonderful. Thank you very much. There's lots to think about, and I think that those questions actually create fodder for further discussion. We could talk about them all a whole lot longer. I do hope those discussions will carry on further. I wanted to make the point that within this panel, we have 2 AUHF members. So the IFC is a member of the AUHF, and EcoStone is also a member of the AUHF. We'd love to encourage others to come and join us as well. IHS and BuildX in particular, the two of you might wish to join us. It really does build up our capacity as an industry to engage with one another and then share more broadly. Thank you. You've closed our day of presentations today really beautifully. Thank you very much for that. We're now going to move on to the annual general meeting of the African Union for Housing Finance. That's a members only meeting. And so the sessions for the public will start tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock with the first session is a masterclass on PropTech, which will be run by Dr. Roland Igbinoba, who's the founder of the PropTech Association in Nigeria. So thank you very much for your contributions today and for this really great discussion. And I look forward to engaging with all of you further offline and well, hopefully one day in place too. Thanks so much.
You. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.